So next on stage would be Indrė Valkiūnienė. She is a wall painting conservator and restoration project manager with extensive experience in mural conservation. Since 2016, she works as a restoration project manager at the Opus Optimum. She also serves as a lecturer at the Vilnius Academy of Fine Arts, and today she will talk about forgotten wall paintings from 17th century. Stage is yours.
Tere kallid kolleegid, hello dear colleagues. Today I would like to talk about threats arising from significant events currently unfolding in the world. These threats are connected to the ideology of opposing forces and to the desire to change not only geographical borders, but also our beliefs, values, and traditions and identity. Living in Lithuania, we are very close to the threats posed by Russia, and this has been the case for many centuries. So this is not only about present-day events. Events from different historical periods have shaped the fate of today's heritage site. Wall paintings often find themselves at the center of the destructive process. After such events, they were often painted over, hidden, or completely destroyed. Even today, we continue to discover hidden wall paintings. We study them again and try to understand their history. In this presentation, I will present two cases of 17th century mural restoration that we have been working on in recent years. These sites are very different, but both were once hidden and forgotten. Construction of the Siesikai castle began in the early 16th century, and the building had featured typical of a fortress. This is reflected in the towers with arrowless, the deep moat, and the surrounding ditch. Only two towers survive today, one round and one square. The palace or castle was surrounded on three sides by a moat and on the fourth by a lake. The Daumantai-Siesickiai noble family owned the estate until the middle 18th century. The last owner, Mariana Daumantaitė Radvilienė, married Mykolas Radvila, and the estate passed to the Radvila family as a dowry. In 1704, the Swedish army ransacked the palace, and about 40 years later it was purchased by Konstantinas Daugėla. This family remained there until the Soviet occupation. In 1940, the Siesikai Manor, together with its land and buildings, was nationalized. In 1946, a school and several residents were placed there. Later, a Soviet collective farm operated on the site until 1872. After the farm was dissolved, the manor complex was abandoned. And the end of the 20th century, research and restoration work began, and this process lasted for more than 30 years. In 2020, we arrived to examine the surviving fragments of wall paintings. We could not observe the full stratigraphy of the layers because later 19th and 20th century layers and traces of reconstruction had already been removed during earlier work. So we examined only the remaining authentical plaster and paint residues. Fragments of wall paintings were found in 5 rooms on the second floor. Among them, the Great Hall and the room in the square tower, which is believed to have been a library, stand out for the figurative compositions and rich floral ornamentation. Most importantly, we were able to identify the prototypes of most of the painted scenes. The Great Hall was the most richly decorated space in the 16th and 17th centuries. When the building was first constructed, the walls may already have been decorated with painting or polychrome ornaments. However, all the figurative scenes and ornamentation that we have found belong to a later layer from the early 17th century. These narrative paintings are especially valuable, so they were preserved, and the earlier layer was not uncovered. About the first phase, we can only say that the colors appear very similar to those of the second phase. The wall paintings in the Great Hall from a Renaissance style composition. In the early 17th century, the entire surface of the walls and openings was painted. Although today only fragments remain. The upper part of the walls with decorative inserts featured a cycle of the 12 months. Below on the large wall surfaces near the fireplace, mythological scenes were painted. Between the figurative scenes, the walls were decorated with fantastical floral motifs that imitate silk fabric. The spaces between the windows were adorned with ornate candelabra-type ornamentation, while the lower part of the walls featured a schematic imitation of stone. We identified that the scene in the upper register were based on engraving from Antonia Tempesta, 12-month cycle, published around 1590 to 1613. The most clearly preserved scene is the representation of November on the upper part of the eastern wall. It was painted only once and later bricked over in the 18th or early 19th century. Because of this, it was covered with clay plaster and acquired a reddish tone. During reconstruction, when the later masonry was removed, the 17th century painting was revealed again. The Great Hall was the most richly decorated space in the In Tempesta's engraving November, we see a landscape with mountains and trees, woodcutters working in the foreground, a town by the river in the distance, and in the upper left corner, the constellation Sagittarius. Although there are significant losses of plaster, the composition is still clearly recognizable. However, it is not an exact copy. The artist interpreted the scene freely and added a new element, a small dog on the right. The elongated format visible today is the result of later architectural changes when the ceiling was lowered in the 20th century. Below, in the second register, on the large wall surfaces, narrative scenes were painted. As prototype, engravings created by well-known 16th and 17th centuries artists were used, especially illustrations for Ovid metamorphoses and overprinted books. Some of these scenes can be identified quite precisely. Below the November scene, separated by a decorative band bearing the inscription Andromedam Liberet, we see a scene from Ovid's Metamorphose, Perseus freeing Andromeda from the sea monster. The left side of this composition was destroyed when a doorway was cut into the wall in the 18th century, so the part with Perseus and the sea monster is lost. However, the surviving fragment corresponds most closely to the engraving created in 1639, but by Johann Wilhelm Bauer. In that composition, figures are shown in the distance on the rocks, watching the battle, and Andromeda is chained to the rock, which we can also see in our fragment. It is also important to note that in different engravings of the scene, Perseus is represented in different ways, sometimes flying, sometimes riding Pegasus, and sometimes standing on the ground next to Andromeda. In the great hall to the right of the fireplace, an allegorical painting was uncovered, based on a 16th century print by Henry Goltzius, Glory and History, from the series Heroes of Rome. This scene is especially important because it reflects not only the artistic ideas on the 17th century, but also present-day concerns related to the preservation of history and memory. The engraving presents symbolic elements that express both glory and the transience of human life. In the mural, these symbols no longer carry the original historical context, but the central idea remains clearly understandable. The composition emphasizes the survival and transmission of history, which remains relevant today. The winged female figure represents glory and rises above a mausoleum decorated with classical architectural elements. Her nudity suggests vulnerability, while her wings represent transcendence and freedom. Next to her appears a winged hourglass, symbolizing the passage of time and the limits of human existence. The trumpet she holds symbolizes the spirit of fame. At her feet lies a skull, serving as a memento mori, a reminder of inevitable death. Below the figure of history is showing kneeling, reading from an open book and holding a phoenix, a symbol of rebirth and eternity, which reinforces the idea of lasting glory. Above the fireplace, Tempestas December composition can be recognized through several details. The figure of a butcher, a pig being slaughtered, a cauldron in the center, and a town in the distance. Some elements, such as the rising steam, are no longer visible. This is because not all pigments have survived. Red and yellow ochres remain the most visible with small traces of blue smalt and green copper pigments. Because of this fading, the painting now appears more graphic, almost like a drawing. Physical analysis of the painting was carried out using ultraviolet and infrared light. We were able to detect details that are no longer visible to the naked eye. For example, infrared imaging revealed stems and leaves or floral ornamentation that cannot be seen in normal light. However, laboratory analysis showed that some pigments have completely degraded and can no longer be identified. The second case concerned late 17th century wall paintings discovered in 2025 in the Church of Discovery of Holy Cross in the Calvary of Vilnius. During restoration work in the presbytery, large-scale Baroque figurative scenes were unexpectedly uncovered. These paintings had been painted over already in the second half of the 18th century during a major renovation of the church. At that time, new altars were installed in these areas, and both the walls and the vaults were completely repainted. As a result, the earliest decorative program of the church was effectively concealed. What is especially striking in that this earlier phase was forgotten so completely that before this discovery, it was believed that the construction of the church began only in the middle of 18th century. In the words, the entire 17th century phase of the building had been erased from historical memory. When we investigate the reasons for this, we found the situation was closely linked to a long-lasting conflict. For almost 80 years, two Dominican groups were involved in a legal dispute over ownership of the Calvarios complex. When the Dominicans of Vilnius finally won this dispute, the church was fundamentally rebuilt. As part of this process, earlier artworks were deliberately covered and in some cases partially destroyed, especially when new altars were installed and the interiors was redesigned. No visible trace was left on the previously community, on the artistic commission, and additionally, many written sources were lost, particularly during the Napoleonic campaign in the 19th century, when buildings and monastics archives were damaged or destroyed. Because of this, we still do not have precise information about the date of these paintings or the identity of the artist. However, based on stylistic analysis, it is clear that they were created by a professional painter in the late 17th to early 18th century. The composition is characteristic of the Baroque. It is spatially dynamic with multiple planes and layers of meaning. The central painted scene is framed by bright red drapery, while surrounding elements are executed in grisaille technique, depicting clothes, angels, and an opened curtain. Art historical research on these frescoes is still ongoing, and we expect it to reveal more details about their origin and meaning. So, and for conclusions, these two cases are very different, but the result is the same. Wall paintings were hidden or destroyed, and history was partly erased. In one case, this happened due to political change and shifting ownerships. In the other, due to conflict between religious groups. Each new phase introduced new layers of reconstruction and repainting. Today, we rediscover these works in a fragmentary and damaged state. Both the secular paintings in Siesikai Castle and the religious frescoes in Vilnius were created to communicate meaning, symbols, and the philosophical or religious ideas of their time. In many cases, attempts to erase these messages led to the covering of wall paintings. And yet, even in fragments, they remain powerful witness of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Indrė. Do we have questions? Looks like not, but I will ask one.
Okay.
In the first project that you presented, the castle one, what is the castle used for nowadays?
It's a museum. It's a museum, but now it's a reconstruction period, so it's not exposition. It's not there, but it will belong to museum.
Okay, and also from that project, like, what was the most, I don't know, surprising part, or did you have these moments where you felt like you're finding something new or interesting for yourself?
I think all conservators of mural paintings know that feeling when you find something interesting, something important. So in these two cases, it was a very, very good feel. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.